I guess in my 52-year railroad career, I have walked to the moon and back on railroad platforms just like this in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And I've come to know there are a lot of untold stories and even a few secrets out there involving the railroad industry. Please join us and subscribe so we can continue to bring you those untold stories and even a few secrets from America's railroad past.
All aboard! Highball it, Eagle!
Have you heard the travel news about the Eagle Way? To your destination happening every day. The Texas Eagle is clicking on the rail. From the Windy City to the Alamo, meet you at the station, come on, let's go. People get ready and catch the wave. Catch the wave, the Texas Eagle Way. Through the heart of the nation.
We're honored to have with us today Thomas Michael Mulligan. And if that isn't a good Irish name that harks to the Transcontinental Railroad in the United States, I don't know what is. I want to tell you a tiny bit about our guest. He won't consider himself this, but we all do. He's iconic to the railroad industry. He retired in 2010 as director of passenger operations on the Union Pacific Railroad. And later went on, Tom, you didn't retire. You didn't just sit around. He became the general manager of the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority. And then he got moving forward for that and became president of the Omaha City Council. And ladies and gentlemen, you and I all know that as the title of mayor. So I frequently refer to Mr. Mulligan as Mayor Mulligan, and now you will know why. Also in 2010, he was recipient of Railway Age magazine's prestigious W. Graham Claytor Jr. Award for distinguished service to passenger transportation. And what an honor, Tom. And I also couldn't help but notice when you retired, your traditional last train order was signed by Dennis J. Duffy himself, who, as you would know, was the longest serving head of the Union Pacific's operating department in your railroad company's entire history. Last but not least, in introducing you, I want to thank you for my last train order from the Union Pacific Railroad. That wouldn't have happened without you. It is the most cherished piece that I have. Thank you again. I wanted to thank you publicly for that. Last but not least, when you were sending us some mementos, I couldn't help but notice you sent a 2009 Tempo Texas Eagle Marketing and Performance Organization plaque that we had given you in San Antonio for distinguished service. And as a founding member of Tempo myself, and on behalf of Dr. Bill Pollard, its chairman, thank you. We're honored to be in such high cotton that you would include your Tempo plaque in with those big deal mementos. Thank you for doing that. That's
well, it's you can see it on the wall right behind me.
I do.
That's yeah.
Yes, sir. I see it. Yes, sir. Dr. Pollard is going to notice that the first thing off when he sees this podcast. Tom, our subject today is our prime subject today is your time as a business car secretary in the Union Pacific Business Car Pool. But before we do that, you really have legacy claim to American rail transportation. Tell us about your great grandfather who went to work on the Union Pacific Railroad before the Golden Spike was driven. Tell us where he came from and how he got there.
Well, he's an Irish immigrant and arrived in Omaha in 1866 and went to work for the Union Pacific. So he was part of the original construction crew that was building the Transcontinental Railroad, starting here in Omaha. And so worked for the Union Pacific in that capacity as on the construction gang, and then came back to Nebraska and homesteaded on the railroad's right-of-way, just outside of Omaha, and Yeah, the Union Pacific went right through the middle of 80 acres, and that was their family farm. And then they had a watering station on the farm where trains could stop. Back then it was like, you went about 12 miles and you had to get more water. So that was a location where they could get water for the locomotives.
And
engines.
he was a Gandhi dancer, was he not? A track laborer.
Right. Yeah, right.
And
And
you discovered that by finding his picture on a mural in company headquarters. Tell us that story.
well, that was my grandfather.
Okay, your grandfather.
that I found. Yeah, grandfather. That I found his picture. It was at Union Station. But my great grandfather, that just no picture of. I've got a picture of him, but it's not when he was on a railroad train or by the tracks. But yeah, we've got his the document where you signed up for your citizenship. I can't remember the name of it, but anyway, but that's dated 1866, and where you sign the form, there's just an X because he didn't read or write, and somebody else had to verify the fact that he had made that X on the application. So, which I think was pretty typical of most immigrants.
Surely. I don't think I realized your grandfather was a Union Pacific man. Tell us a little bit about him.
Well, he farmed and he worked for the railroad as well. He was a passenger brakeman, and that was through the 1920s, and got laid off, right around the time of the Great Depression, and ended up working for the packing houses here in Omaha. Anyway, and when he retired, he was the foreman of the workhorses. They had a team of Clydesdales and but the stockyards used a lot of horses, in a working capacity.
Sure.
And so that was his gig when he retired.
And you discovered him on a mural photograph at Union Station. Is that correct? Your granddad?
Right. And yeah, my grandfather, and it was during the Golden Spike days, 1939. So it was the 50-year, I guess it would be the 50 or 60-year anniversary.
That'd have been the 70th. 39 would have been the 70th year.
Yeah, not too good on my math today. So they celebrated Golden Spike Days here in Omaha. And the movie, which is, it's called The Golden Spike, Cecil B. DeMille's, they were having the 70-year anniversary of that. And so they were having a parade in Omaha. And I saw his picture that was taken. He was standing in the crowd watching the parade go by. And, bingo, that was right after they put the display up. So, gosh, that would have been, I guess it was 1989 when I saw that in Union Station.
Oh, wow. What a warm memory to have and to cherish. Tom, let's move on to you then. You grew up where?
In Omaha.
In Omaha itself. Any early yearnings to go to work for the railroad? Was that ever on your radar?
Well, I should have sent you this picture, Griff. I've got a picture of myself. It looks like I'm about 3 years old, and it was Christmas morning, and I'd gotten a train set, a Lionel train set, and I'm sitting there, and I've got a Union Pacific engineer's cap and a set of bib overalls on. So That would have been 1953. So it looks like I had my eye on the railroad then.
You reckon your granddad provided those, the hat and the overalls?
Yeah, I never thought of that. That's probably where they came from.
So, okay, so you grew up in Omaha itself. I remember you telling me that in your college years, you rode a train to and from 2 points on the railroad. Did you not? Or do I have that story right?
No, you got that right. Yeah, my father, who worked for the Railroad Retirement Board, got transferred to North Platte, Nebraska. That was in 1968. So I was in North Platte from 69 to 71. And I attended a function at the North Platte, Union Pacific North Platte Depot. And it was the last passenger train that was operating on the UP. And it was a westbound California Zephyr. And they had a celebration at the depot platform. They had Wild Bill Cody was riding around on his white horse. And they gave out certificates that day to anybody that was in the crowd so that you could say you witnessed the last Union Pacific passenger train that went through North Platte, Nebraska.
So before that last run, that was kind of your commute in your teenage years, later teenage years,
Well,
between Omaha
no,
and North Platte?
Yeah, when I was in college, I'd come back and forth to Omaha to see my friends. So I used to ride the passenger train. It was UP train back and forth from Omaha to North Platte.
How long a ride was that?
Gosh, it was like 3 hours and 20 minutes. It was, yeah, that was 90 miles an hour.
I remember you telling me, I hope I have the story right. I remember you telling me one groggy Monday morning that you were sure hoping that train was on time because you had a test to get to.
Yeah. And I wasn't feeling all that sharp. I think I might have been a little hungover, right?
A strenuous weekend before in Omaha.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's move right to the heart of the matter. You know, I can understand. I'm really astounded by nearly every part of your railroad story, but especially this one. I can understand Mrs. J. Gould wanting her husband to have a male secretary because she didn't want some Victorian woman riding around on the business car with her husband. And I can understand Mrs. Averill Harriman on the UP for the same reason, not wanting a woman riding around in a business car. I was when you were riding along somewhere many years ago to some function, doing something for the railroad together. I remember you began to tell me this story about your years as a secretary on the business cars. And I was astounded to learn that that job category had survived into the jet age. Just absolutely astounded. So where I'd like to begin, tell us how it ever came to be that you became a Union Pacific employee.
Well, as I said earlier, I went to college for a couple of years in North Platte Junior College. Came back to Omaha, which would have been the fall of 1971, and was fortunate I got hired by the Union Pacific. And I started out as a office boy in the general manager's office. And it was there that I figured out that a good way to get into management at the Union Pacific was to be a traveling secretary to one of the executives. And so I ended up, I went back to night school and took 9 hours of shorthand. I already knew how to type, and learning shorthand was another real challenge. It was like trying to figure out hieroglyphics. But anyway, I was able to pass the test at the railroad to take shorthand at 90 words a minute, and you had to type, I think it was 60 words a minute. So yeah, I got myself qualified, and I was very fortunate. I was working in the general manager's office, and I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. The general manager needed a new traveling secretary. So that was December of 1978. And so, yeah, it was an individual. His name was Harold Brandt, Brandt.
Yes, we have a picture of him you graciously lent that we'll show during this podcast. Absolutely.
And he was a former train dispatcher himself. And at the time, that was another good position to attain or to go into senior management from the railroad. That was a good background to be a train dispatcher as well. So yeah, so that was the position. It was secretary to the general manager of the Eastern District, and so we were headquartered right here in Omaha.
And that would have been in 1971.
I started for the railroad in 71, and I got the traveling secretary's job in 77.
77. Okay. That's
Right.
That's just amazing. The job lasted that long, and isn't it funny how even 100 years later, that's where higher level railroad managers as yourself came from in the previous century, were from those business car secretary jobs. So isn't it funny how not much changed from the Jay Gould era in terms of up the ladder?
Yeah.
One of the mementos you also sent that I don't think I have ever seen before, although I presume I knew they existed, and we'll be showing this also to illustrate in the podcast, a Union Pacific Railroad freight train pass. Good on any freight train. And I want to know, did you ever have to use that pass?
Yeah, I did. I used it a number of times. And I was fortunate. My pass was good to ride in the locomotive.
Correct.
And it's which was a lot better than riding in the caboose. So yeah, I probably used that about a dozen times through my career.
All right, just traveling to and from different points of work.
Right.
In other words, in our term, deadheading to and from your next workstation.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of times I used it to go home to see my parents, they were in North Platte, so I could ride back and forth between Omaha and North Platte.
I bet it wasn't a 3-hour ride.
No, not them.
Okay, so Mr. Brandt, H.H. Brandt, was the UP general manager that you were assigned to. Now,
Yes.
was Union Pacific Business Car, and thank you for providing this photograph, was UP Business Car 111, quote unquote, his car? Was that Mr.
Yes.
Brandt's assigned car?
Yes, yeah.
Oh.
That was the car that was assigned to the general manager of the Eastern District.
Understood. Okay, and how often were you out on the road in it?
We used to probably take 2 to 3 trips a month.
Wow.
Some months it might only be 1 trip, and other months it could be, more than that. But yeah, we used it extensively. And that was one of the reasons why people that were in a job like that as a general manager, that they still did have a secretary with them when they went out of town. We'd have mail bags shipped to us all over the railroad, North Platte, Denver, Cheyenne, Ogden.
Company mail.
Company mail, right.
That would ride the business car.
Well, a lot of times the company mail, like say we were in North Platte.
Right.
And we had parked the business car there at North Platte. Then the office here in Omaha, they put mail bags on a caboose.
Right.
That would be taken off wherever, North Platte or Denver, wherever it was going to. And then we'd get the bags, the mail bags would be delivered to us on the private car.
Wow. Okay. All right. So, tell us, you know what, if no one else is interested in this, and I'm sure there are besides me, but I'm interested in this. All of my life, all of my railroad life, I heard that the purpose of a business car was to serve small portions of cantaloupe for breakfast to a train master so his ass could be chewed out. That was the primary purpose. Now, I want to know, for my own edification, did that occur a lot on those business cars in your experience?
Yes.
Okay, so there is some truth to it. Go ahead, tell us an
Yeah,
experience if you can.
that's the short answer. Well, you know what? It was a tool. The business car was a tool for the general manager to interact with a lot of managers that ultimately reported up to him, up the chain. So, we could leave, as an example, we could leave North Platte, and between North Platte and Cheyenne, we'd have the train master and the superintendent for that location would ride with us on the car. And so, that could be say a 250-mile trip. And, everybody was seated in the rear end of that business car. And so, we got a chance to look at the railroad firsthand. And, you could review construction projects or just the maintenance of the track, how it rode. And there was mile after mile of silence. But when it was time for a question, the general manager was firing them off left and right, and it was a unique experience for me because I had to be there. I was taking notes or just observing the railroad myself. It was a real unique experience. I got to see every mile of the UP.
What happened if the train master or the superintendent did not know the answer to Mr. Brandt's question?
Well, depending upon the question, it could get a little sticky because some things individuals were expected to know, and if they didn't know it, it wasn't a good sign. So. Yeah. I saw. I think it's safe to say I saw more than one career that pretty much crashed after taking a business car trip.
Wow. Did you ever see anybody fired on the car itself en route?
Well, let me say this: the stage was set.
Understood.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of my own experience as a young
Right.
pup track laborer in all places in Texarkana Yard at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was just a track laborer leaning on a shovel waiting instructions. But an assistant train master at that hour asked a then Missouri Pacific general manager, "How do you want to proceed with cleaning up this derailment, boss?" And that general manager looked over at him and said, "If I need to do it, then I don't need you, son." So from that moment on, that train master made his own decisions, that assistant train master. So I suspect, Tom, maybe General Manager Brandt had the attitude of, if I'm supposed to do the job, then what do I need you for? Would that be right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So tell me what your quarters were like on UP Business Car 111.
Well, I had a combination room office and it was about the size of it was bigger than a roomette on an Amtrak train. So it was about the size of a bedroom that you would see on one of the superliners, except I had an upper berth, and down below I had a little desk and typewriter and all the stuff that goes with that. And I had I had my own bathroom that was in my bedroom. So, but it was pretty close quarters. It was well, it was neat, especially if you were a railroad fan that I was. So I never complained about it. I mean, it was pretty close quarters, particularly if you had your bunk down. So it was you had to have a step ladder to get up in your bed. But it was a really unique experience.
Was there a typewriter stand in it where you could type?
I had a typewriter built right into the desk, and so I used it all the time. As I said earlier, we always had mail that was sent out to wherever we were, and so I would also return mail bags to Omaha, and it go back the same way it came out. We'd put it on a caboose and take it back to Omaha.
What was bedtime?
Well, it was after dinner, and after further meetings, maybe after dinner. So a lot of times, like I was on the telephone in the morning at 5:30, and a lot of times, the day wasn't over till midnight, and so there was
Radio telephone?
No, the business card. If we were parked in a location like, say, North Platte, there was connections there for regular bell lines. We had 2 telephone lines that would plug into the business card. So when the train was moving, we'd use the radio for the telephone calls. But when the car was parked, we had regular telephone service.
Was your method of transportation in the latter 70s, was that a combination of both freight and Amtrak trains that you rode behind?
Right, exactly. Yeah, let's see, we would ride on the California Zephyr. Union Pacific at the time, it went over the Union Pacific track from Denver to Cheyenne.
Correct.
And Cheyenne west to Ogden.
Right.
And of course, the Pioneer got split there. So, there was time we rode the Pioneer a number of times going up to Portland, and the Desert Wind down to LA.
Wasn't that the old Bory cutoff, or am I misremembering?
Yeah, the Bory cutoff was the well, let's see. I guess that was considered the number 4 track because between Cheyenne and Laramie, the original main line went over Sherman Pass, Sherman Hill.
Right.
And then tracks, if I'm getting this right, tracks 3 and 4 went around Sherman Hill to get to Cheyenne.
Please tell us that wonderful early morning story when you're on the telephone with the chief dispatcher getting OS reports. For those viewers who may not know, OS stands for on sheet, meaning put down on paper, literally on sheet. OS is a railroad term that's easily 150 years old. But you were getting OS reports, or attempting to, from a chief dispatcher. Tell us that wonderful story.
Well, he wasn't very polite, and I was just trying to do my job, and my job was to get the train information for the general manager. So as he was bullying me around, I finally told him, I said, I'm really not that interested in this information. I said, but the general manager is. So the quicker we can get this information to him, it'll be in your best interest. So after that, he finally, understood what I was going through. I was just trying to do my job. So,
and you rather promptly got the information you needed, probably.
Yeah, I got everything I needed.
So, okay, when it was just the two of you and the attendant on the car, in those years, I presume the job category was still porter, wasn't it? Business car porter.
They had changed the title. Well, no, if for the individuals who worked that were assigned to a business car, they were steward.
Steward,
so
okay.
We had a steward and a chef. So
you had a two-man crew.
Two-man crew, and it was the same two individuals every trip. They were assigned to the general manager, and they were true professionals. Both. I was just a kid. I was in my 20s, and both of these individuals, they were closer to retirement age. They had worked, in the passenger train operation days at the Union Pacific, but then they chose not to go to Amtrak, and they were fortunate enough to get a job on a business car. So, so it'd be the four of us.
After hours, so to speak, was the atmosphere on the business car more relaxed? Were you ever on first name basis, or was it always Mr. Brandt?
No, it was always Mr. Brandt, and I always referred to him as the boss. So we were very good friends, but it was he was the general manager, and I was his administrative assistant. So it was a really interesting job.
Would a little liquor flow after hours every now and then, or not?
It's safe to say yes. Griff, when the very first trip I made on the business car, it was just the two of us, the general manager and myself. And he told me, he says, Tom, he says, you're going to see a lot of things, you're going to hear a lot of things, and they stay right here on the train. And, I just said, yes, sir. And so, and it was, I was honored to really have that job because, I was trusted with a lot of information.
Surely.
But that's the way it was. And, loyalty was a really, really big part of that job, as a lot of jobs have, managers' jobs. And so I accepted that. And I always, I protected, what I needed to protect for stuff that was going on the business car or on the railroad, and just used it as I needed to.
Did you find that people were often very interested to try to pick your brain? Or
all the time.
All the time.
All the time. Yeah. And that but that worked to everybody's advantage, because I was able to disseminate information and or protect it, whatever the case may be. And it was very interesting. And the whole notion of having a traveling secretary, well, I suppose in the early days, the job evolved just as a lot of jobs evolved. But, it was the ability to have somebody who was protecting the telephone, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if, like, even when we were out of town, most of the time I stayed on the business car so that I was there to, either take care of people that came to the car, during the day or at night, and then always to answer the telephone and, able to, because, that was before cell phone days.
Surely.
So, it was the communications is, pretty much limited to what you got on the bell line or on the radio phone.
I'm going to guess that the general manager probably heard from the vice president of operations or his office on a fairly regular basis. Would that be correct?
Well, yeah, we had the morning conference call was like 7 o'clock in the morning. So all the senior staff or from the operating department were participate in that daily call. So that was the first interface of usually many calls, during the day.
You and I grew up on the railroad to find out that that's one thing that did not change very much, did it? Those early morning conference calls. Dirk, tell us about when your business car 111 went in for major repairs and you were assigned to Averill Harriman's private car, the Arden, which was, I think, from what I've read about that, it was really built to Mrs. Averill Harriman's specifications for herself and her husband when he was chairman. But how long? Tell us about the Arden.
Well, yeah, we when our car had to go in for major repairs into the car shop here at Omaha. And so we used the chairman's car, which is the Arden, Arden. That was the name of the Harriman's estate on the Hudson River, up north of New York City. And so it was approximately 6 months that we used that car. He was very pragmatic about the business car, in that if he wasn't using it and it needed to be used for other railroad operations, that the car would get used. And yeah, the Arden wasn't a real fancy car.
Really?
Okay. Yeah.
Was it fancier than the 111?
No, it was. As a matter of fact, they didn't have a TV on the Arden because he didn't. He wanted to project an image. This was all work, not play.
Surely.
And so he didn't even want a TV on his car.
You're talking about Mr. Harriman.
Mr. Harriman, yeah.
Okay.
So it was. He was the last Harriman that was chairman of the Union Pacific.
Yes.
So I'm trying to think what year that would have been. Right around, the late 70s. Anyway.
Were your accommodations on the Arden then more Spartan than on the 111?
Well, from my perspective, it was better. It had a bigger secretary's room.
The Arden did. Okay.
The Arden did, yeah. So I kind of enjoyed that. Yeah, and it was, they had some really neat pictures on that car. I will say that. They had some of that, they were the tribal Indian. Oh gosh, it was off the Lewis and Clark expedition.
Right. Okay.
And I'm trying to think of the artist's name who went. along the same path as what Lewis and Clark did. But anyway, there's some real famous Indian tribe pictures that was on that car, and so those were kind of neat. If I remember right, there was a couple of them that were originals
on the car itself. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell me what food was like on there. You said that the two stewards were impeccable in both service, so I'm sure the dining service must have been impeccable too.
Well, let's see. My weight went from 155 pounds to 185 pounds in about a year. So, yeah, the food was spectacular, and it was it was 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so
were you expected at the table all 3 meals?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I had my chair was, of course, the general manager was at the head of the table, and I always sat right on his right, and I always had a stenography pad with me because a lot of times, he'd get a thought, or if it was just the two of us on the car, we'd work the mail at breakfast, and so he'd dictate, if we needed letters, or we were still sending telegrams back in the late 70s.
Surely.
So, yeah.
Did dignitaries frequently come aboard or not?
Oh yeah, yeah. That was a steady stream of mayors, people who a lot of our local managers, like in North Platte, we had a superintendent there at North Platte, so like he and the terminal superintendent, the traymasters and stuff, they'd get invited down for breakfast. And we always used to try to make sure that we cycled everybody through, or everybody had a chance to have a meal while the car was in town, so that they got some FaceTime with the general manager.
Wow. That's I would say that is that's the highest level of railroad tradition. So expect nothing less from the Union Pacific. I remember one time outside of the depot at Longview, and I asked a UP man, brand new UP official, the Missouri Pacific had just been taken over, and I asked him, I said, "How do you like the white chat we have along the plantings here at the depot?" And he looked me right in the eye and he said, "Well, on the UP, we'd have used pink or a different color." In other words, a higher standard. I just politely nodded my head. Yes, sir. So this begs the question, this wonderful picture we're also going to show of Tom Mulligan, a heavier Tom Mulligan with a full head of hair. Was that at your desk when you weren't out on the road?
Right. That was in the office. Yeah.
Okay. And what were your duties when you weren't out on the business car?
Well, I mean, it was just like we were on the business car, but we were in an office. So it, pretty much, there was, busy days, long days. I used to always start at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. And I always worked at least 6 days a week. It was Saturday was, a half day instead of a full day.
Oh, wow. Half a day on Saturday.
Right.
And I guess when you're on the road on the business car, that was 7 days a week.
Yeah. Every day was Monday.
Every day. Yeah. Wow. Wow. I know you worked a lot with Harold Durant, the chief engineer of the Union Pacific Railroad. What was he like? What was he like to be with?
He was a very interesting man. It would have been his grandfather pushed a push cart across Wyoming. He was descended from Mormon immigrants, who had moved out to Utah. So he had quite a history with the Union Pacific himself, and had come up through the ranks in the engineering department.
I noticed that you have a picture we're also going to show of Mr. Brandt and Mr. Durant. I believe that's on the 111.
Right.
And
that's,
you also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that was from an inspection trip. And so the two of them there in the back of the car.
And you also have provided us a wonderful photograph on the 111 of the general manager's seat at the rear of the 111, where he has the speedometer and the brake valve reading, brake pressure reading, the whole thing. I didn't see, maybe I couldn't see in that photograph, was a radio telephone at that location also?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And is that where he sat, or did he sit on the sofa or a chair, or did he occupy that spot?
No, he occupied that spot. And what you don't see in that picture is on the other side of the car was another desk, and that's where I generally sat. And even if it was just the two of us on the car, say between Omaha and North Platte, we would inspect the track, just even if it was the two of us. And we continuously, we'd take notes about this, that, or the other thing.
What's the fastest speed you ever saw the brass speed recorder show?
106 miles an hour. And that was on a Amtrak train. And the Union Pacific, it was okay to exceed the speed limit if the trains were late. So
really, even into the Amtrak era?
Yeah. So
wow.
That was between probably Green River and Rollins, Wyoming.
I'm not so sure that's the case today.
No, it's not. It's not the case today.
Right.
But if the trains were late, they would let them exceed the posted speed limit to make up time.
Because this is a railroad history podcast, you would already be aware, but for our viewers who may not know, prior to World War II, there was no federal regulation of speed on American railroads. It's however fast you wanted to run, and however late your train was, you could run as fast as you could run it to try to make up the time. Yes. So I'm glad another enlightenment you've given me. I'm glad some of that lasted way beyond the years when I thought that it might have.
Yeah. When I first went to work for the UP, we were still running freight trains at 90 miles an hour, as well as the passenger trains.
Could you say that one more? I know I heard you, but I just think that's so important. Could you say that one more time?
Yeah, the UP ran freight trains, certain freight trains, up to 90 miles an hour, as well as the passenger trains. Between
Green River again and.
Well, no, it was on the double track, which was from Omaha out to Ogden, and on most of the subdivisions along that route. The tracks were good for 90 miles an hour.
Did they have cab signals on those stretches, or just CTC?
Yeah, both. There were some stretches.
Wow.
There were some stretches of that, what they call it, 247, 249 territory, where it was direction of traffic.
Right.
The eastbound, westbound.
Right.
It was.
Tom, tell us that one business car untold story that needs to be told? I'm not asking to divulge any secrets or use any or to name any names. What's that one untold story that posterity needs to know about being a business car secretary in the 20th century?
Well, Griff, to be real honest, I think I already told the story, and that was the conversation that I had with the general manager right after I got the job, and just the guidance that you're going to see a lot and you're going to hear a lot, but it all needs to stay right on this railroad car. And so I guess that was a way that you had to accept the fact, not so much accept the fact, to realize the fact that this was an important situation that you're going to be in and day out, and you need to treat it as such. Is that this is a lot of high level stuff went on that railroad car, and a lot of it was private and confidential. A lot of conversations were had about different individuals' careers and budget necessities, budget cuts or stuff of that nature. So it was very interesting.
Sure. I never thought of it that way. You were privy to information that could directly affect a lot of lives up and down the railroad on any given day. Wow.
Yeah. And safety was always our number one concern, and a lot of conversations about safety.
I'm going to venture a guess that the general manager's business car, the air conditioning always worked, the heat always worked, the telephone always. I bet there wasn't a whole lot broken on those cars, or was there?
Well, it was the biggest challenge used to be heat, and all those passenger cars they don't really have that much insulation, so to speak, and plus, just the nature of a railroad car, where the wind can go, above and underneath the car. So yeah, especially like in Nebraska and Wyoming and Utah, the winters are brutal, and that there was a number of times on the train where that car froze up, and once the pipes are frozen wherever, you've just got to get yourself into a warmer climate, or the car's got to go into a maintenance facility, because you just couldn't get it unfrozen.
If you were on the rear of a freight train without access to hotel power like a passenger train or steam heat, where did you get your heat on those cars? A generator?
Well, yeah, we had a generator, and it was, well, it was just like a hot water, in the old hot water radiator days.
Right.
That was the same thing. So, it was, and that business car, if I remember correctly, was built in 1923, and it got converted to a business car during World War II. So, it was an older car. I guess not in railroad, of course, 1923 and 1973, that's been a long time ago now.
It doesn't seem like it, but you're absolutely right, sir. It seems like about 10 or 15 years ago, doesn't it?
It does.
Sir, thank you also for sharing with us that we're going to show a photograph of. You actually have a pass that's good not only for locomotives, separate from your locomotive pass. Now you've got a pass that's good on cabooses. And I can, when you said you tried to stay away from those cabooses, I understand. You know, as an 18, 19-year-old kid, brakeman, I always wanted to ride in those cabooses, especially a rigid drawbar one, because it's like a ride on a roller coaster. But I can understand once we got a little older, you'd rather stay up there on that locomotive where things weren't quite as hard on the body.
No, you know, there was a lot of injuries that just came off of riding on a caboose. You know, that slack action, you know, people don't realize, I mean, how dramatic or drastic, I guess, maybe, you know, a situation can, you know, if you get a slack run in, it can be like getting thrown up against a wall.
I completely understand. I God rest his soul. There was a wonderful conductor who later, he was a Missouri TNP passenger conductor who later became an Amtrak passenger conductor, but in freight service, a wonderful man out of Mineola by the name of Jess Salmons, just like the fish. And we were coming out of Fort Worth on ED, you know, El Paso Depot, hot shot. And it was a rigid drawbar caboose. And Mr. Salmons had just back from back surgery. And he took one look at me on that caboose. He said, "You do what you want to do. I'm not riding back here to Mineola." And he went to the engine. And I'll tell you, that is, sir, a 100-mile trip that I will never forget in my life. Until I latched myself in, I went from one end of that car to the other. So I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Tom, before we move into some conclusions here, number one, thank you so much again for your very valuable time and your insight here. I know I'm repetitive on purpose. I know you don't view yourself this way, but you are an icon to the American railroad industry, and it is certainly a privilege to know you and to be your friend. And to have you take the time on this podcast to tell us about some railroad history. And no one listens to me, but maybe they will someday. People would be well advised in this country to take Tom Mulligan's advice on how to run a railroad, because he knows how to do it. That being said, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I want to digress as we conclude. I want to digress one step away from business cars, and I want you to put on your Union Pacific Director of Passenger Operations hat, and I want you to tell me a secret that I've never known the answer to. And if you're on the spot, just say, "I can't do it, I don't know," and then call and tell me later. But not that I would remember the dates per se, but from May 22nd, 2000 until February the 21st, or February 28th, 2001, as you well know, in East Texas, we did something very strange in the annals of passenger railroading. We ran down the UP side, the Union Pacific side of the main line, south and westbound. North and eastbound, we ran up the UP side, but south and westbound, we ran down the old Cotton Belt side, the St. Louis Southwestern side. And let me tell you, for those viewers who may wonder what I'm talking about, what I mean is at Marshall or Longview, Texas, if you were a passenger westbound, you had to ride an Amtrak bus over to Gilmer, Texas, from Marshall or Longview to go south or west, but you got to come back home right to your hometown. And Tom, I know I've told this story many times, but I'm honored to do it in public. I can still see you on that inaugural bidirectional run. And you'd gotten on the engine at Texarkana coming southbound, and you pulled into Gilmer and you got down off those engines. You had on bright red suspenders. I can still see them. And I just looked at you and I said, "Do you feel my pain?" And you knew what I meant. You knew that I was the guy, as well as the others of us in East Texas. You knew I was the guy that's going to have to put up with this after all the fanfare. You know, I was the one going to have to live with this day by day. And I will never forget you and always be grateful. You leaned in very closely and you said, Yes. So with that in mind, I know that in those years, I presume he's long since retired. I don't know that though, but Steve Barkley was your vice president of operations at Spring, Texas. And he called this bi-directional running, meaning you could catch the train one direction at Marshall and Longview, but not the other. By the way, just a little caveat, I got the privilege of naming it. It was never Gilmer, Texas. That stop was called Eagle Transfer on the railroad. And I got the privilege of naming it Eagle Transfer. But anyway, Mr. Barkley called this the crowning jewel of his entire operations. Again, it lasted from May 22nd, 2000 to February 28th, 2001. And the secret I want you to divulge from people on my level, we never knew. It all ended on February 28, 2001. And very shortly thereafter, we're all crowded into the Marshall Depot passenger waiting room with a big, just jam-packed in there, if you'll remember, hosted by the mayor of Marshall, Audrey Carroll, who has done a podcast and will be joining you on this list of interviewees. And Kay Bailey Hutchison's staff was there. Amtrak's vice president of operations, Richard Phelps, were there. You were there, a big deal. This has ended. It's gone away. We're now going to be going back through Marshall and Longview both ways on the UP. For somebody from my level, please tell me what the hell happened. Because we never, all we knew were we went from nightmare to it's all over. Let's give a round of applause. But we never knew what happened. How did it happen?
Well, it seems that I'm trying to think, and you probably have the dates. When did the Texas Eagle go back to daily service? Do you remember that date?
Yes, sir. That would have been on around about May 22nd, 2000, when we began bi-directional running. I think that was one of the takeaways, one of the negotiating wedges to get the train daily again, was that it would operate bi-directional.
Would operate bi-directional. And so it was just one of those situations that, it became part of that negotiation to return to daily service from the, tri-weekly train. And it was a situation where, we were trying to put 20 pounds of potatoes in a 10-pound sack. It just, that transferring of customers and their bags. And I think for somebody that doesn't really understand what has to take place when you do a bus transfer, somebody like you and myself know, we tried to make it work. And that bi-directional running, of course, was one of the takeaways or advantages, of the mergers, where you were able to run northbound on one track, southbound on the other track.
Still do today, yes.
Still do today. But it just, for the passenger trains, it just didn't make sense. And we tried to make it work. And I think somebody finally just declared victory and said, we're not going to do it anymore. And we went back to, operating the passenger train on just one route.
Thank you for disclosing that, because I remember sitting in the room with my fellow rail compatriots, and here was the whisper between all of us on the local level. Well, all of the politicians and public grassroots support people can take all the credit they want, but somebody at the UP said yes, or this wouldn't be happening. So I guess Mr. Barkley got to yes, is what you're saying.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Okay. Well, that makes better sense. Mr. Mulligan, sir, have I left out anything pertinent here that I should have asked you that you want to tell as part of your story?
Yeah, I will. When I was first approached at the railroad that if I wanted to be the NRPC officer for the UP,
Let me just
and
explain that stands for National Railroad Passenger Corporation. That's the Amtrak liaison officer. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
yeah, and my career, or I was offered the opportunity to really, really expand my career, and I did realize it at the time how involved that was, and how what the need was, to have a liaison, between the two companies, and that really turned into quite a position. I mean, I was dealing directly with Amtrak's chairman, Amtrak's president, Amtrak's vice president of transportation, who Richard Phelps was the classic vice president of transportation. Richard and I became very good friends. We're still good friends today.
Surely.
So that was a really, really interesting assignment, and I really enjoyed it, and I really tried, as best as anybody could. You needed to protect the Union Pacific Railroad, and you needed to protect Amtrak at the same time. And so I always kind of became an Amtrak cheerleader at the UP, because I could, I tried to the best of my ability to explain the situation that Amtrak was in, and as well as explain that Union Pacific had obligations that we needed to fulfill. And the number one main one was that Amtrak was supposed to have priority on the day-to-day operation thing.
Sure.
And people needed to be reminded of that. That hey, this is a big responsibility. There's you've got to. There was a lot of people riding those trains, and still there are today, and they have expectations, and so it was that was a really neat time in my career, and I worked for the UP almost 41 years, and at least 20 of it was in the passenger operations side of it, and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
Well, that
made a lot of good friends.
That opens the door for me to ask this question. Will you promise to return where we can do a podcast just on your directorship of UP passenger operations? Because there's so many stories there I would love to hear, such as the Sacramento service that I remember you working awfully hard on.
Oh yeah, that was and that was quite a success story.
Yes, still is. Yes, sir.
It
still is today.
Yeah, that was a really interesting. It's a neat service. It really is.
May I say again what a credit to the railroad industry you are, and I know you well enough to know I'm not going to ask the question again. I'm not. But I get it. What happened on that car stayed on that car. Even 30, 40 years later, you're not going to tell, are you? What a credit to you and to your company that is. That's a higher standard I wish we had more of in this country. Tom, I'd like to leave you with this thought and to thank you. There was it's a very brief railroad story, but you'll understand it. There was a Texas and Pacific Railway signal maintainer by the name of Lee Lyons. God rest his soul. And Lee was a TNP man, Texas and Pacific man. I mean, his blood ran TNP red. And he didn't have use for the Missouri Pacific Railroad, and he didn't live into the Union Pacific era. But one day he came into the passenger depot. The CTC board, as you would know what that was, that the telegraph operator used to help route trains, help the dispatcher. The CTC board was located at Longview, and it controlled the railroad from Marshall to Mineola, Marshall, Texas to Mineola, Texas. And the CTC board had recently been removed, and I really missed it, because if I want to know where the passenger train was, all I had to do was, walk back a couple of rooms back in the depot at Longview and just look at the board and see where the lights were. But that was taken away. For those of you who might want to know, that's the passenger refreshment lounge in today's restored Longview depot. That's where the centralized traffic control equipment was, in that room. But anyway, so all of that equipment was transferred into two portable metal buildings, silver gray metal buildings, just railroad utility buildings out on the platform. And of course, they required a certain temperature, and they had heat cool units in them. Well, on a hot Texas summer day, the heat cool, in this case, cool units failed, and all of that equipment burned up, or whatever happens to that equipment. And the railroad went dark from Mineola to Marshall. And for those of you, Tom would know, meaning the entire operation was at 20 miles an hour for as long as it took to get things back up. And I want you to know, I watched Lee Lyons haul cables and sweat and groan, and 103, no telling what it was inside those metal buildings. I don't know. But finally, at the end of this long day, about a 12-hour day, he comes in and he has one extension cord, just one orange extension cord. And he said, "Can I plug this into the outlet in the waiting room?" And I said, "Well, sure." I said, "How long?" He said, "Well, it's going to need to be there for a while." So I said, "Well, okay, but we're really going to have to tape this down and make sure no passenger trips over it. What am I going to tell the company, about how come I can't lock the door at night because the cord's big?" And he said, "Well, the other end," I said, "Well, what is this cord doing?" And he said, "Well, it's lighting all of the signals between Marshall and Mineola again." It's running this one extension cord is running this $3 billion corporation. And I immediately said yes, but I want to end our podcast with this. And I said, "Lee, go home. My God Almighty, do not let these trains." I've watched you. You didn't take a break and all that. And he looked me right in the eye and he said, "Griff," he said, "there are just some days you have to give them a TNP job, whether they deserve it or not." And Tom, from the bottom of my heart, and for many of us and my perspective in the railroad industry, thank you for giving us a TNP job every day, even some of those days when we didn't deserve it. Thank you, sir.
You're most welcome.
I salute you. You have my undying love and respect, sir.
All right, sure. Thank you very much.
God bless her. Thank you.
The Texas Eagle Way, the way to and from and all points beyond. www. Texas Eagle got y'all. Come on the way, the Texas Eagle Way.